This 2001 manual transmission C5 Corvette is getting a set of American Racing 1 3/4 long tube headers. They're uncoated 304 stainless steel and they look like they are bent very nicely and very precise. This kit includes the mid-pipe, including catalytic converters. It's got O2 sensor bungs after the cats, a set before the cats, and even a bung for your wideband oxygen sensor already installed, and that's a very nice feature. And here's the part of the mid-pipe that goes to your stock or aftermarket axle-back exhaust, and it's neck down from 3-inch tubing to the stock 2.5-inch tubing. So let's see how well these fit and how much trouble, if any, they give me.
Toys for life.
In my mind, I will be contrasting them with the speed engineering headers I installed on the C6 a few months back, as you may recall, and that video is in your upper right-hand corner in case you want to check it out after this one. In addition to the American Racing headers being installed today, I'm also installing an upgraded tunnel plate from TPS Motorsports, and it's made out of aluminum that is about 4 times thicker than the stock tunnel plate that is made out of stamped steel. In addition to that, I'll also be installing a DEI insulation kit on the tunnel plate and the sides of the tunnel to help keep the interior of the C5 nice and cool. I'll need to remove 4 bolts that attach the stock mid-pipe to the axle back mufflers. These 2 bolts attach the mid-pipe to the torque tube with the hanger springs. Here are the stock after catalytic converter oxygen sensors. And I'll have to remove 3 nuts from the exhaust manifold studs on the driver's side that I've already sprayed with penetrating fluid. And of course, there are 3 more nuts on the passenger side. And finally, these hanger bolts will need to be removed as well. Nice low-mile C5, so fortunately removing the mid-pipe didn't present too many problems. Now it's time to remove about 137 tunnel plate bolts. Replace this thin tunnel plate with the thick aluminum tunnel plate, including the insulation material. Since all of these bolts go through and cinch up against the insulation, I torqued them to 89 inch-pounds and put a dab of Loctite on all of them in case the insulation compresses a little bit more over time. Now it's time to install the little side insulation kit. Goes right here on each side of the tunnel area. And here we go. Started off by cleaning everything with a little solvent to make sure it's going to stick and stay put. This DEI heat shielding is some pretty thick. Seems to be cut out real nice. Sticks really well and pretty much covers that entire tunnel area. I have no doubt that this will help keep the heat down inside the cabin. Moving up top, time to take the spark plug wires out. Take the spark plugs, remove the air injection tubes, and then hope and pray the bolts fastening the exhaust manifold to the head don't break. Here's a peek over here at the driver's side. The driver's side factory exhaust manifold is the harder of the two to remove. I had to remove its heat shield first, and that gave me just enough room to snake it out from the bottom. Fortunately, I did not have to remove or even disconnect the steering column shaft or the alternator. On the passenger side, the dipstick and dipstick tube assembly needs to come out first, and then with a bit of wiggling, the stock exhaust manifold will come out from the top. Here's a look at the stock exhaust manifolds on the ground, and they actually flow quite well compared to those super restrictive exhaust manifolds Corvettes back in the day were forced to exhale through. That having been said, obviously the new American Racing long tube headers are going to flow significantly better, and they provide a scavenging effect as well. Here's another quick peek at the evicted mid-pipe assembly. And of course, the shiny new parts that are patiently waiting for their turn. The passenger side long tube header was the more difficult of the two to get in place. I tried, but there was no way it was going to slide in from the top. So ultimately, I ended up lowering the cradle assembly a few inches, and that gave me just enough room to sneak the header in from the bottom without having to remove the starter. Once both of the headers are in place, resist the temptation to tighten them up fully to the heads. I find it very helpful to leave them a little bit loose as you're mocking up the three pieces that make up the mid-pipe assembly. It helps quite a bit to have a couple of stands or something to support the mid-pipe assembly as you're getting all of the bolts in place and started, including the bolts that attach the mid-pipe to the axle back exhaust. Once everything is in place and all the bolts are started and the clamps are on, start tightening the bolts a little bit at a time and work your way around until everything is tight. Then give the headers, the mid-pipe, and the axle back a quick visual check to make sure none of the pipes are too close to the chassis, because if they are, there's going to be a banging if you're driving the car aggressively and it moves just enough to clank on the chassis. On this particular setup where the mid-pipes attach to the axle backs, on each side it is very close between the pipe and the chassis. So I had to work a little bit by loosening and adjusting the bolts to make sure the pipes were centered within the chassis. Then go ahead and reinstall the oxygen sensors, the spark plugs, and the wires, and then plan on taking as much time as necessary to secure all of the wires out of the way so that nothing is laying on top of any part of the exhaust. Since this car is a manual transmission, it does have a clutch line that gets kind of close to the header assembly on the driver's side. So I bent the bracket that holds the clutch line to move it a little bit further away from the exhaust system. And as an added precaution, I added an extra layer of heat shielding over that clutch line to help keep it cool. With these headers, for the most part, the stock spark plug wires work pretty well, but there's a couple of them where the boot or part of the wire is a little bit close to the primary, so I use zip ties to help pull them out of the way. The owner is aware of this and he knows to keep an eye on it because he is aware that burnt spark plug wires are the #1 problem associated with installing long tube headers. He also might buy a second set of wires where some of the boots that go to the spark plugs are angled, and that'll help pull some of the wires away from the headers. Some people install heat sleeves on their spark plug wires, and that definitely looks cool, but you still need to make sure none of the wires or the boots are laying directly on the primaries. So overall, the installation of the American Racing long tube headers on the 2001 C5 went off without a hitch. Anytime you're doing a header swap on a C5 or a C6, the biggest risk is that one or two of the exhaust manifold bolts break while you're removing the stock exhaust manifolds, and that can add a lot of time to the job. But fortunately for me, none of the bolts broke. Unfortunately, I didn't get any before or after sound clips of the exhaust, but that's not super important because the biggest determining factor in what it's going to sound like is the brand of axle back exhaust that's on the car. Maybe the car still has the stock exhaust system, or perhaps someone has installed a super loud billy boat exhaust, or something right in the middle like a Corsa Sport, and they're all going to sound vastly different. One thing I can say is that the car does have a relatively mild axle back exhaust, so with the addition of the long tube headers, it was a little bit louder at idle, but not too bad. But more importantly, that motorboat sound that comes from the factory H-pipe was gone. Cruising down the highway at 55 miles an hour, it's perhaps just a little bit louder than stock, but when you mash the fun pedal, it's still within the spectrum of being quiet, but it's definitely more aggressive. I give the American Racing headers an A for overall quality and workmanship. I also give them an A for overall design and the overall fit of the system. And finally, they get another A for the quality of the joints. The tolerances of the American Racing slip joints is nice and tight, and that allows the clamps to effectively do their job, and the ball and socket type joints that go from the header collectors to the mid-pipe work very, very well. The only aspect of the American Racing headers that doesn't get an A from me has to be the price, and this may be subjective, but in my mind, asking the average C5 owner out there to pay $2,000 for a set of headers is a lot of money. Like I said at the beginning of the video, as I was installing the American Racing headers on the C5, in my mind I was contrasting the recent experience I had installing the Speed Engineering headers on the C6. Now obviously this won't be a 100% apples to apples comparison, but the C5 and the C6 are this close in design, so I think some of the observations that I have are reasonable. I give the C6 Speed Engineering headers an A for overall quality and workmanship. I give them a B- for overall design and the overall fit of the header system. And in my opinion, the main downside to the Speed Engineering headers is the quality control, or lack thereof, of the slip joint fittings. Even if it's fully seated like this one is, look at how much room there is. They're just too damn loose. Most guys try to overcome how loose these joints are by excessively over-tightening the clamps and asking them to do more than they were physically designed to be able to do. And in the process, they don't get tight and they blame it on the clamps. So in my mind, the Speed Engineering headers get a D for the quality control of the majority of the slip joints. That having been said, if you're installing a set of Speed Engineering headers on your C5 or your C6, test fit all of those slip joint connections, and any of them that you find that are excessively loose, using a hacksaw, cut a relief cut through the outer pipe. Performing those simple relief cuts allow the clamps that are included with the kit to much more effectively clamp the two pipes together. Check this out. So right now, I've got it just hand tight. I'm just using a little, this is only like 8 inches. That's it. I can barely move it, and look at how much that's hardly anything. You don't have to wreck your damn clamps. You just have to modify the pipe. As for overall value, I'd have to give the Speed Engineering headers an A- because they cost about half as much for a similar setup as the American Racing headers. However, if you have to pay the full shop rate for all of the extra tweaks they will require, it'll probably be about 2/3 as much. As far as the horsepower output from each brand of headers, I think they're probably about the same. Richard Holdner has tested many super expensive long tubes versus the cheapies, and he's usually found that they're within just a couple of horsepower. That's going to do it for this one, guys. If you have firsthand experience with either one of these brands, please leave it in the comments below. If you got any value out of the video, please tap that thumbs up so YouTube knows to share this with the Corvette community. And most of all, thanks for watching.